Anna Orth, would you please come up to the witness stand? I guess it's a table, not a stand. I was just corrected. The witness sit. Thank you for coming, Anna.
Thank you for having me.
Would you please give your name, and Mayor, the floor is yours.
My name is Anna, and I'm a resident and registered voter in Pima County. I volunteered as a poll observer.
Can you get a little bit closer to the microphone,
Sure,
please?
of course.
Thank you.
Again, my name is Anna, and I'm a resident and registered voter in Pima County. I volunteered as a poll observer on October 16th, and then I signed up to work as a poll worker on November 3rd in a neighboring precinct. Would you like me to just give you an overview? Is that
Yes, please do.
Okay. Well, I wrote in because I was aware of some irregularities that happened while I was a poll observer, and some different activity that I just felt uncomfortable with on election day. So I'll go ahead and start with what happened on the day that I was an observer. I was certified prior to that to be able to watch the two people that would be correcting the problematic ballots, which I guess are called, they were duplicates. When I walked into the room, they said, "I'm sorry, you can't be in here. You're going to go into another room." So I had to walk back to the front desk. I was escorted from that area back to the one area where the ballots were being separated from their envelope. And there were 30 to 32 people doing this, and there were probably 14 to 17 tables where there sat two people, and it was supposed to be a Democrat and a Republican. But not every table had a Democrat, but not every table had a Republican. So many of those tables had either a Libertarian or someone. There was one table with someone from the Green Party, and then there were 3 or 4 tables that had a Pima County worker at each of those tables. And they worked there at the elections office because when people came in from the building, they talked to them, and their conversations led me to believe things like, "Oh, did you leave your lunch? Did you bring lunch?" And they said, "No, it's over in my office. I'm going to go get it later." And she was back in 5 minutes. So similar conversations that went on with people who came in with those workers. I found it difficult for me to be able to oversee 32 people and what they were doing. I was able to catch a few of the things that were mistakes, or where ballots were they were taking them out of the envelopes and putting them on in a pile. And their job in this particular room was to watch, to make sure that the ballots were in one direction, and then they would double check the count of the ballot to the envelope I imagine to check it against the envelopes that came in. Each table was given a bin to put these in, and these bins would then go to another area where they were being stacked up to be tabulated starting on October 22nd. Many of these had mistakes, or they were written in pencil, and the workers, as I went around, had questions on, is this a good ballot, is this not? I was told by the gentleman that ushered me out of the place where I was supposed to be and said, you aren't supposed to talk to anyone. You do not communicate with them. If you have an issue or you see an issue, you need to go to the supervisor, which is at the front of the table, front of the room. So as I saw things, as I went around to each table, I would go to the supervisor and I let her know, you know, they don't know what to do with this ballot. It's a pencil or blah, blah, blah. And she'd say, no, it's fine, it's fine. So as I went back to the tables where I saw these issues, under my breath, I said, you need to go tell her. You need to go talk to them about this. And so many of them said, what do I do with this ballot? It's in pencil. Oh, it's fine, it'll go through. Or some people wrote over their ballot, over the little oval circle where they were supposed to mark, and those were put into a separate pile that would be called duplicates. Those duplicates then went to another table and were then taken to the room where I had been ushered out of. And there was one person, there was supposed to be a second person, and I said, is there a Republican at that table? Because I said, is there a Democrat and a Republican? And he said, well, we hope so. They have to, if they get here, but it'll just be, you know, just be me, and hopefully a second person. So as I saw these ballots along this area that they marked as dupe, which I understood to stand for duplicates that were going to be fixed, they would then be taken to the table, to the room where I could see a glass, it was a glassed wall between us, and they were taken around to the other side to be dealt with. I didn't get to see that at that point. So when I left and the other person took over for me at 1 o'clock, I was there for 5 hours, I shared with her, I said, there's a lot of mistakes that are happening. They're not putting them in the order that they need to be in. So when they get folded, they become a duplicate because they can't be counted. The machine wasn't going to accept them, so it had to be then taken out of the pile and put into a duplicate. So when I left, the man who had ushered me out of the room, the first room, came to get me at 1 o'clock and walked me straight over to the front desk. And he said, I hope everything went well. And I said, well, my concern is not necessarily where I was. It was hard for me to watch 32 people by myself. But more concerning is when these ballots were opened in the other room. And so to give you kind of a sense of how it worked is the ballots, however they were collected, were brought into an initial area of the Office of the Elections in Pima County. And in that room, the envelopes were then opened up and the signatures were checked. So then they would go through a double door where they were then sent to the room that I was in, where there were as many people as I explained before, trying to put them in an order, not necessarily of where they were from, but how they came in. So let's just say there were maybe 200, 250 per box, I'm not sure, but they came from different zip codes, different areas. It was whatever was mailed in. And then those were then put aside to be counted after the 22nd. My concern was the amount of ballots that were considered to be problematic that were then leaving the area that I was in, going to a room where there were only supposed to be 2 people, and yet not even sure there was 2 people. So that was my experience as an observer that I shared. I thought that was concerning. The other thing is when I came back to drop off my ballot, I had to drop it off outside, and there was no longer a police officer, and we found out that it was because our mayor, or not I live in Oro Valley, but the Tucson mayor wasn't allowing a police officer in front of the office anymore because it was upsetting to people to come and vote. And so I asked the man, I have to put my ballot out here. And he said, yes. So I said, how can I be sure someone isn't going to come and take this big box? And he said, no, we're watching it. And I said, who's you? And it was him and an elderly woman who was about 85. I don't know, and I'm sorry, meaning that she looked fragile, and I don't know how that could be protected, but I was a little concerned about that. It did make it in because when I checked my ballot, it was counted. But another question is how do we know who we voted for? That's a separate issue, but my point is that I don't know if my ballot actually has the people that I voted for. And, you know, as I said, that's something separate from what I experienced there as an observer. As a poll worker, I was assigned to be a provisional ballot clerk, and that was on election day. And on that day, I had worked the primary in August, so I had an idea of who would come by, what the issues were. But this time, we had so many more people who needed a provisional ballot than we had been allotted to have in this one precinct. So that was concerning. But the people that came to me I had so many people who said, I didn't ask for a mail-in ballot. My wife isn't listed as an early ballot person, but I am. And those are the kind of people that we had a lot of. But secondly, I had people who had just moved here from other states, and most of them were from 2 apartment complexes. It was concerning because as we counted them, we probably had over 40 people who were in one apartment complex with one address who had moved here from other states that I began to turn away. I'd say, I don't know, within the hour, we were so busy that I took a break and went outside, and a gentleman with a yellow shirt said, hi, I'm with the Democratic Party. I'm here from California, and I'm here at this precinct specifically. I came from a Phoenix in Maricopa County, a precinct there, and we're here to help turn Arizona blue. And I don't know if just looking at me, he decided that he felt safe saying that to me. Maybe he assumed that I would be okay with that. I was shocked, and I said, oh, so what? He said, oh, I said, so what is your plan? What are you doing? And he said, well, I have lawyers on call to contact immediately if they don't allow them to vote, people to vote. And I said, well, there was a cutoff date. And he said, nope, every vote should count. So that made me nervous, of course, because I didn't know the law specifically, and I didn't want to do something that would cause a problem. So I thought, and he said, oh, I've only had to turn away, just a couple people were turned away, and I was able to help one person go back in. Well, that was probably sent to me because I was the provisional ballot clerk. So, of course, that was somebody that I had to take care of. So I went back in and thought, well, this is unusual. I'm concerned that somebody outside is going to be calling an attorney on something that I did because I said no. I sent somebody away and said, I'm sorry. I mean, if you don't have any proof that you've lived here or proof of having registered, I can't give you a ballot. So I called the recorder's office and explained this, and she said, well, you have to let them, all votes will count, but it's on a case-by-case basis. So at that point then, I had to call in to the recorder's office at every single ballot, and you have to understand, we ran out of spaces. So, I mean, we were at like 200. I'm sure you can check on this to be sure, but we were over the amount of ballots we had. But every time I called the recorder's office, they would ask me for their name and their date of birth. And when they would look that up, the person on the phone would say, okay, well, you can go ahead and let them vote. And so I was trying to find a constant that I could go by. so that we could speed up the process. I mean, is it if they've moved here and they have this, and if they've moved here at a certain date, what is it? And they would not give me any constant. They just said, you just have to call for every case is different. So my concern and why I wrote in was that I had 2 people right after having a slew of people who came in from other states wanting to vote without having been registered and allowed to vote per the recorder's office. I then had someone come in from Maricopa County and one from Pinal County. It just happened right after. And each of them, when I called in, they said, nope, you're going to have them go back to Maricopa County, and the other one will have to go back to Pinal. And I said, well, how is that this person from Wisconsin and this person from Michigan and this person from Kentucky was able to do that? And she put me on hold for a second and then came back and said, well, it's just that we have their records more accurately than we have for Maricopa. We just can't, we're not able to process a Maricopa County ballot. So I had to send them away. But then as other people were coming through, it made me question why that was happening. So I asked them, do you have information that will prove that you are a resident, that I can verify that you are registered to vote here? And they would pull out their card, and it very clearly said that they were Republican. They had a voter card. So to test this theory out, I called the recorder's office and asked them, and they were denied. I had to deny them. And so I was in a frenzy trying to take care of all of these people, but I found that the discrepancy between every vote counts and only those that the recorder's office would allow was indicative of how they chose who they wanted to allow to vote. And there was a consistency in the voter preference that they chose. And that concerned me, because by the end of the night, which was at 8:15, after we counted all of the votes and they got put in the box and we were waiting for someone to come get them, I'm in the car and the election was already counted for Arizona, which I found appalling. First of all, after working 15 and a half hours taking in votes, but the experience really led me to believe that it was not, there should have been a system that we could have followed, because I understood that registered voters ended on a certain date and you couldn't come in and vote, but I was having to allow people to vote that literally had just moved here within 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and they were all from 2 different, not all of them, I take that back. There was a large majority, a large percentage of people who had addresses from 2 apartment complexes. And the last thing is that I had a homeless man who came in with a registration. And the reason I know he's homeless is because I said, where do you live? And he said, he didn't speak English, and he said, I don't have a home, but when I was at a shelter, they registered me at the recorder's office. So when I called about it, and they said, well, he was probably registered to be in this precinct. And I said, but he doesn't live here. And they go, well, it's anybody who was registered downtown can vote. And so I found that to be odd. And last week, for work, I was on the other side of town, and I saw this gentleman on the south side of Tucson with his shopping cart. And I swung into the parking space and called him and just said, hi, can I talk to you? And when he saw me, he ran off, for who knows why. But my point is these are the kind of people that had apparently permission to vote in a precinct that was literally 25 miles away, because they had a voting card that was given to them from downtown that it was a downtown precinct that allowed him to vote here. So my point is that if somebody from Pinell County and Maricopa County can't vote, how is it that in this precinct, how is it that a homeless man from another area of the town and also people from other states were able to get permission to vote? And that was concerning to me, and that's why I'm here.
Ms. Orth, thank you very much. Mr. Giuliani, do you have any questions specific to this witness?
Sure.
Please proceed.
Couple of, try to.
Just to give you a marker on time, it's 12:02.
Okay. So you were there for 16 and a half hours, Ms. Orth?
On election day?
Yeah.
Yes.
Wow. And you were supposed to work with the ballots that were being examined?
I was working with the voters, the ballots of voters who were not able to walk into the precinct to vote normally on a ballot. So some of them came to me saying, it says that I got an early ballot and I never got it. Others said, it doesn't even say that I'm on there. It says that I've already voted, or I'm not allowed to vote here. Those were the kind of...
So these were ballots that had difficulties?
Yes.
And there were 28 or 35 people that were looking at those ballots that you had to observe?
No, that was, okay, I just described to you my experience as a poll worker
Right.
on election day. Those 30 people that I mentioned earlier were when I was a poll observer on the 16th of October at the elections office in Pima
Right.
County.
And you were unable to see what they were doing?
It was a room as big as almost maybe half the size of this banquet room, and I was an observer watching 30...
As far away as we are?
I could walk behind them. But I couldn't walk behind 35 people at the same time.
And what were they doing?
They were taking them out of the envelope. They had been brought in from the recorder's office where the ballot had been opened. The envelope had been opened, and according to what I was told, the signature had already been checked in another room.
But you didn't see the signature check?
No, I didn't get to see that. They would take these out and they would take...
Did you ask to see it?
Yes, and I was not allowed...
And were you refused?
Yes. So they said, and I wasn't allowed to talk to anybody, but as I said before, I could talk to the supervisor. These people who sat at each of these tables, who were representative of mostly one party, with the Democrat Party, and they would take them out of the envelope and then put them in a pile, and then separate the inside envelope. In Arizona, we have an outside envelope, then the inside envelope, and then the ballot, right?
Right.
So the ballot was then collected from the bin. So each table would get a bin, and they would separate them, put the ballots in a pile, put the envelopes in a rubber band, put them to the side, and then mark that they had such and such amount of regular ballots and such and such amount of duplicates, problematic ballots, that then had to be taken to a table, and they would separate those, take the duplicates, mark them, put them at a table, which were then taken to the original room where I had been ushered out of. Not that I was not to help them.
In a room that you were excluded from, they examined the signatures?
Yes. No, they started examining the signatures, then were moved to this room. And then from this room, they were then piled to then be tabulated later.
Did they do a further examination of the signatures?
No, not in this room. The
So
only room that was done in this...
You observed no examination of signatures, and they refused to let you do that?
Right, I was only allowed to watch these people put these in piles. So when I was ushered back
So
out...
how many ballots do you think, just a rough estimate, how many ballots, 1,000, 100, 2,000?
I would say each box had between 200 and 250 ballots. And I was there for 5 hours. And during that time that I was there, each table went through 6 to 7 to 8, depending on how fast they were and how many mistakes they made, because many times the ballots weren't straight and they had to recount them, or I would hear them say...
So how do we do that arithmetic?
All right, well, let's see, 250 times 8. Somebody who's not nervous maybe can say
2,000.
That's per table, and there were about 16 to 17 tables of 2 people doing this at the same time.
So as I best understand this, there were 2,000 ballots times 17 tables.
Yes.
That you or anyone else that
By
you knew
myself.
of got a chance, no Republican got a chance to observe that as far as you know.
Well, I was the only observer allowed in at one time. So a gal took over for me at 1 o'clock when I left, and I told her, I'm exhausted. I don't know how you can watch all 17, but stand behind one of the tables, and you'll see that this particular table keeps folding them and tearing them, and once that happens, it has to become a duplicate. And when this becomes a duplicate, it goes to that table, and it goes to the room where we don't get to see what happens to that. So you can't talk to them, but you can do this and tell them, look, that's folded or that's crooked, or and I said, if you see one again that has a pencil on it, the supervisor is saying that yes, she told me specifically that it could go through. I mean, told me that it couldn't, but told them that it could. So I said, there's some discrepancy in what she's telling me and what she's telling them. So you know, just do your best to try to keep an eye on this particular table is doing this, that particular table when I walk by is doing that. That one over there has a Pima County worker on it, and she works here with them, and there's no Republican at that table, so it's very concerning. And so
it sure
that
is.
was so when I was ushered out, they came specifically twice to me and said, please don't talk to anybody, and you cannot leave on your own. Make sure that when it's time, what time do you have to leave so we can walk you out? When they walked me out, the gentleman said, I hope everything went well. And I said, well, I'm concerned because here they were, you know, my only concern is the handling of the ballots, which makes them ineligible to go through the machine correctly. But it's the room before me and the room after me it's a concern. I don't get to see.
Well, let me ask you about that. So a certain number of ballots were now put aside as duplicates.
Yes.
Duplicates means that they had a problem.
Yes, that they have to be duplicated.
Right.
So
it didn't mean there were 2 ballots.
Right. That's what
Duplicates
they called
can
them.
sound like 2 ballots. What
Right.
it meant was there's something wrong with it, and therefore we may have to duplicate it.
Yes, and that's the room that I was originally
And they were put aside.
put aside,
And they
taken
were brought
out.
into another room,
There was
and
2 people.
you were not allowed to go in there.
No, I was not allowed to go back there.
So you were cut off from that also.
Yes, I was specifically
You were cut off from
taken
observing
out.
the problem ballots.
Yes, I was specifically taken out of that room, ushered out, and brought into this room, which really was just the room, as I explained.
And how many could you estimate that is?
Each table would have an average of, let's see, I would say maybe 1/16 of the pile. So, you know, let's say an average of maybe 10 to 20 ballots. But by the time I left, these bins were filled. They would fill them, they would go correct them or whatever it is that they did, and brought them back.
Best estimate.
I would say my guess would be close to in the day that I was there, just in 5
yeah.
hours, maybe 2,000 ballots.
Okay.
Yeah. About,
And you had a sense that when there was problems with ballots or whether someone should vote or not, the choices that were being made were to allow people that appeared to be voting for Biden and the Democrats to vote, and declining those who appeared to be people who might be voting for Trump or the Republicans.
well, yes, I began to get that sense after I saw that people from other states who weren't even registered in the state of Arizona were being allowed to vote. I was given direction that I had to give them a provisional ballot, because as they walked out, there was a gentleman out there who told me he was specifically there to make sure that every voter who wanted to vote could vote. And so that was on election day, though, Mr. Giuliani. That's not on the
Right.
the day
I
after.
got it.
Okay.
I got it.
And on that day, that was happening. And then when I would get a voter who was from another county and had some indication, sometimes they had a shirt that either said Trump on it, or they showed me their voter card and said, they gave me some indication that they were a Trump voter, and I had to call on them, like I did for every single person that came in to the recorder's office, and I was told to send them away. And so it was at that point that I started to see that this can't be right. This can't be right. So I tested this and asked her,
right.
And then especially as I
Glad
said,
you recognize that.
yeah. And so when I said you all live at this apartment complex, and you all live at this other one, and they said, well, yeah, we have to. We're all coming in to vote, and so I said, well, are you how long have you lived here? Or is your other precinct here? Well, I've lived here, or I've lived there. And they still were allowed to vote. Many of them were not residents for more than a month. Other people said they were registered in another state, but that they were here. And then, as I said, I think the nail in the coffin for me was when this poor little old homeless man, and I speak Spanish, so I spoke to him and said, how are you here? And he said, I was told to come vote. I want to vote. And I said, okay. Well, where do you live? And he goes, well, I lived in a shelter downtown. Well, downtown is 15 miles from where I live. So
Right.
I'm sure that's not his precinct. He should be voting there.
So you thought there were about 2,000 like this, roughly?
I would say easily, just in the 5 hours that I was
Okay.
there on one specific day, and that was on a Friday, they were going to be counted. They were being collected to be tabulated.
One
on
last
Sunday.
question. The gentleman who said he was there to turn Arizona blue.
Yes, that was a
What
guy.
was he? What was his official position?
He had a
Was
sign.
he an
on-
inspector of some kind?
No, he was a poll observer that was from California. He was from LA, and on a break, I walked out there and I said hello and just walking, and he said hi, and I said, what are you doing? And he said, well, I'm a poll observer for the Democratic Party, and I'm here. I said, oh, and as he goes, the weather's hot here. It's not as hot as it is at home. And I said, well, where are you from? And he said, I'm from California. And I said, what are you doing here? And he said, well, I'm here specifically to help turn this precinct blue. Well, this is one of our problem ones. And I said, oh, and as I said to the panel over here, I don't know why he felt comfortable telling me that, but he said, and I said, you came all the way from LA? He goes, no, actually I came from another precinct in Maricopa, where it was another one that we were focusing on, and now I'm here.
What was he doing? Was he campaigning? Was he encouraging people to vote for Biden? What activities did he take part in to turn Arizona blue?
Well, as I understood, because I was inside working, his job was to make sure that anybody who was turned away to vote, that he would have people he could call, attorneys in his words. He goes, I have a couple attorneys that I'm connected to right now, that if anybody's not allowed to vote, I can make sure that they're represented. And so anybody who was not allowed to vote in that polling place, I was the one that they would be talking to. So of course, that was somewhat directed at me, since I'm the one who would say, no, you can't vote. So I don't know what else he was doing, but he said there was a group of them that were coming in.
They sent him there sometime after you began doing that?
He was there, well, we started at 5 o'clock in the morning, just getting ready. So when I went out for a break, I was maybe around 10 o'clock, and he had been there. And I'm sorry, I don't remember what he had on his shirt, but they were very clear that they had T-shirts, they said, that they matched. Another person came in to take over for him, and it was a yellow shirt with something written on the front.
Well, thank you very much for your service and for your courage and testify, I just make one point, Mr. Chairman. Her testimony alone, and I see no reason why she isn't telling the truth. By the way, she is under oath in the sense that she submitted an affidavit under penalties of perjury to what she just testified to.
Thank you, sir.
34,000 votes unobserved would change the nature of the election. Just her testimony.
Indeed it would.
One witness.
Sir, thank you very much.
Yes, thank you.
Members, I know everybody wants to ask a question.
I have one.
We need it, well, everybody has one. It is now 12:15. I expect this hearing, at the rate that we're going, we will be here until late into the night. Please be brief with your question, and I would appreciate it if there's no follow-ups, just so that we can have a lunch break and kind of set the expectation for the folks who are here and get back at it.
And we'll try to make the witnesses focus a little bit more.
All right, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Leo Biasucci, I'm sorry, Representative Biasucci, you're first, and then Mr. Burley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Anna, for being here. Just a quick question about the voters that you said were coming in that were from out of town, or they just moved there, whatever their reasoning was. Did they have an Arizona ID with an address or anything to show you? Were they on the voter rolls, or these?
No, they were not on the voter rolls. They had out-of-state driver's licenses, but had either an electric bill or not, or some kind of a bill that they showed me on their phone, showed me that they lived in this particular precinct. With that, I would call the recorder's office.
And you would verify through them that they were indeed legal to vote.
Right. And so then when I'd say, well, when did you move here? Well, I moved here on such and such a date, but you had to have registered, I think, in Arizona by the 15th, and then it was extended to the 22nd or the 23rd. Right. So it was just questionable that they were still allowed to vote, but
Sure.
I had a longtime voter who wasn't allowed to vote from another precinct,
Right.
and yet someone could vote from another state.
Perfect. Thank you.
Senator Burley.
Yes, sir. Thank you, ma'am. When the votes that needed to be duplicated, the ones that needed to be corrected, when they went to the end of the room, did you notice anybody in there that was actually overseeing that correction, a Republican or a Democrat?
No, as I mentioned before, that's the first room I went into, and he explained to me that this is the room where that would happen, but that I was not allowed to be in there.
When you were in there before they sent you somewhere else, did you
Yes.
see a Republican and a Democrat
No, he was
observe?
alone. He was, no. it
Only
was
one.
just one
And
person.
do you know how he was registered? Do you know if he's a registered Republican or a Democrat?
I don't know, but I have an idea, but that would
Okay,
be,
well, bottom line is.
We'd appreciate no speculation. Thank you very
Well, it's
much.
a violation of the law anyway, because you're supposed to have both. No, thank you.
All right, members, one question, and then we're going to break for lunch. Representative Townsend?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Anna, I just have a really quick question. We had our county recorder in Maricopa County instruct voters to cross out mistakes on their ballots for the November election, and then we later had a judge say, no, that was likely breaking the law. You can't do that. We've also heard from adjudicators saying that they had seen a full Republican ballot all the way down, but that President Trump's name was crossed out and the other candidates was circled in. Is it possible, in your opinion, in that other room that you weren't allowed to be in, when there wasn't a second person watching the adjudication, were there pins allowed? Would someone be able to cross out one candidate and vote for someone else?
well, again, I wasn't in there to be able to say this accurately, but there's only, can make an assumption. If a room requires two people and an observer, that a person by themselves, it's possible, of course it's possible, that that's what happened. But those are the kind of ballots that I'd see. Because I was able to see them as they came through in this room. They were either all for the GOP or all for the Democratic Party. But one of the president little oval had been marked off, or not marked, crossed, which makes it a problematic ballot. So that would have to go into the other room that you're asking me about. And again, I wasn't in there to be able to speak accurately about what this person could have done or didn't do. And that to me was the problem in this whole issue. I'm useless to be able to watch people just putting them in order. We should have had an observer watching
Okay,
these
thank you.
corrected ballots.
All right. Ms. Orth, thank you very much for your testimony.